is on the NFL. Let's talk about that. And by way of background, Skip, you touched on this lightly, but Greg Hardy's possible NFL punishment. The league's new personnel conduct policy calls for a 6-game suspension for first-time violations involving assault, sexual assault, and domestic violence. Hardy was convicted of 2 counts of domestic violence in a bench trial last July, but had the right to appeal in July. The conviction was dismissed in February when his accuser could not be found to testify, essentially, as we just discussed, perhaps bought off. So he reached a financial statement with her. NFL spokesman says Hardy's case remains under review and the league will have a resolution on discipline as soon as possible. Skip, they're waiting on evidence. They've now sued the courts in North Carolina to find out all the details of the actual
filed
case
a complaint against them.
Yeah, in July. So what do you believe his punishment should be?
Stephen A., this is tricky for me, but I'm going to just do it in a vacuum. I'm back to what I said. He was convicted during a bench trial of assaulting the female and threatening to kill her. Just in and of itself, if I just take that in and of itself, man, he should be gone for a year. Now, maybe you soften it slightly, given the fact that he did pay some price last year. He did go on the Exempt, the commissioner's Exempt list, thanks to his team put him on the list. And yet he was paid for the 15 games he missed. He only played 1 game last year, as did Adrian Peterson. 1 game. Adrian Peterson finally got suspended, and it cost him 6 game checks. But so far, Greg Hardy has lost no salary yet. So now it comes down to should that count as part of his punishment that he didn't get to play? He was taken away from his team, and he just didn't get to play football for 15 games. Maybe a little bit. Now, the new standard you point out is 6 games. Man, given the fact he was convicted,
right?
Shouldn't it at least be 8 games just to send that message? Half a year? Just half a year. Again, in my heart of hearts, I'm saying 1 year. Given what we just went through with Ray Rice, it just seems like that is so bad. It's just... the reality of it is so bad, the testimony is so shocking that it's a 1-year suspension. But I'll go, because he missed the 15 games, Stephen A., take away 8 game checks, and I guess I'd be okay with that.
But Skip, perhaps that's the reason why the NFL is taking so long, because they could be in agreement with you. He might miss the whole year. We do not know.
Maybe.
Because they don't have all the evidence.
I wouldn't have a problem with that.
All right. Stephen A., your take on what you believe his punishment should be.
Well, first of all, when I said 4 games, I was only comparing it to Big Ben Roethlisberger having received 4 games. So I'm saying that should be the minimum. In a perfect world, I believe it should be 8 games, personally. And the reason why I believe it should be 8 games is because the bottom line is a judge during a bench trial convicted you, said that they believe you're guilty. And I can't ignore that. I can't ignore that had sullied the league. I can't ignore the fact that impugned the integrity of the league, the brand, the shield, and that you had something to do with that. So to me, it's automatically 6 to 8 games because in terms of the new domestic policy implemented by Roger Goodell in the NFL, it called for a minimum of at least 6 games for a first-time offender and a lifetime ban for a second-time offender. So what does that mean, Skip? If you suspend them for these 6 to 8 games, the message has already been sent. This ever happens again, you could be banned from the National Football League for life, period. So clearly, that is a huge deterrent. You give the 6 to 8 games also as opposed to a year because you're also respecting the very system you leaned on to give him the 6 to 8 games in the first place. We can't sit there and say, he was convicted by a judge in a bench trial, so we're going to respect the law, but then turn around and don't respect the law, which acknowledges he had a right to appeal, that he categorically denied it, and that he appeared willing to go to a jury trial until he ultimately reached a settlement out of court with the victim in question who couldn't be found by prosecutors for the jury trial. Now, that's not to cast any aspersions on the victim in question here, because she did give testimony during the bench trial. She did give evidence to the police, ultimately the district attorney and the judge. She did put herself through that, which is a hell of a lot to ask for somebody who's been victimized the way she was allegedly victimized. And then to ask her to come around and to revisit that horrible experience, okay, that's a lot to ask for anybody. And it's a lot to ask for this woman. So we understand why she may not have been available, but nevertheless she wasn't. And because she wasn't, they had to throw out the case, and ultimately he ended up settling with her out of court because they couldn't find her to pursue with the jury trial. Well, that's part of the law. And if that's part of the law and he exercised his right within the law, the same law we can use to convict him, which ultimately bans him for 6 to 8 games, we can also use that to say, okay, there might, because he's saying it's not true, there could be a scintilla of doubt. Let's give him the 8 games, since he knows a lifetime ban awaits him if something like this ever happens again. I think that's hitting it in the middle, and I think that's the safe way to go.
I'm with you on that. What I'm not with is the National Football League dragging its feet on this again. Why weren't they on top of this? Why weren't they ahead of this? He was put on the commissioner's exempt list, Greg Hardy, back in mid-September, September 18th, and now you have to wait all the way until Jerry Jones finally says, I'll do it, I'll take him.
Yeah.
And now you file a complaint just so you can get the pictures of this accuser when she was taken to the hospital that night, in which they used a measuring stick to measure the size of her wounds. Really? Why wouldn't you be ahead of this curve? You knew it was coming, so now you start the process, and we still haven't heard anything about Deflategate, and we still haven't had any ruling on Textgate in Cleveland, or Noisegate in Atlanta, or Tampergate with the Jets. I don't know what they're doing. Are we waiting till the league meeting next week in Phoenix? I don't know.
That it seems as if the NFL is operating out of fear, paralyzed. They can't make a decision for fear of what people might think of their decision.
Kerry, with all due respect, there's no excuse for that.
No,
on the part of the NFL.
Absolutely. But I'm saying they're operating that way, though, because they're so concerned about what everyone's going to say. It seems as if they're operating that way.
But let's not just throw it out without pointing out why they're so wrong. You hired women to address this issue. You covered yourself in every possible turn in the aftermath of the Ray Rice situation. It should be incredibly easier for the National Football League to make these decisions more expeditiously. The fact that they take so long and drag their feet for so long, even after having these ladies in the commissioner's under the commissioner's umbrella with the NFL, makes it even more egregious.
Seriously, you've had this whole offseason to prepare, and the moment Greg Hardy signs the dotted line for Jerry Jones, shouldn't you just bring down the punishment? He is gone for 8 games. Well, why couldn't you have already decided that?
I have no idea why they're not making the decision, and no one is giving them any passes by any means, Stephen A. I'm telling what it looks like from the outside in, that they're just so concerned about what is right and what is wrong instead of just issuing the punishment. We have decided, or you both agree, 8 games minimum. You said a year.
I would go with a year if they could pull it off.
But again, the decision's still to be determined by the NFL. Greg Hardy is now a Cowboy. We will obviously talk about this later on in our show at the second hour. We'll have Mark Brunell give us his insight. He's our NFL analyst. We leave it there. Coming up next, we're going to talk about Steph Curry and the Warriors. They defeated the Hawks. Did he help or hurt his case for MVP? The discussion after the break.